Get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm an admissions officer here at the Rhode Island School of Design, better known as RISD, and I'll be presenting today's Portfolio Tips webinar. I'm also joined by my wonderful colleague, LJ.
Hi, everybody. I'm LJ. I'm also an admissions officer here at RISD. And I'll be kind of in the background today, just kind of answering any questions that you all have via the Q&A chat box.
Amazing. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in to the presentation portion of today, and then we'll have a bit of a conversational Q&A. And before I forget, while we're presenting, we'll both have our cameras off just to make sure there's no Wi-Fi hiccups, and then we'll come back to you about halfway through. LJ, if you could just let me know when you are seeing the presentation.
Yeah, it looks good.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, welcome everyone to our Portfolio Tips presentation. Before we begin, on behalf of RISD Admissions, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to the families, friends, and community of the two students who were killed at Brown University this past weekend. In the words of RISD's president, Crystal Williams, she wrote in a recent email to the RISD community, "We are a community of people who seek to serve the human project rather than destroy it. And I hope that we all find strength in the light of our loved ones and each other in this challenging moment." If you have any questions about RISD and Brown and Providence regarding last weekend's incidents, you're welcome to reach out directly to admissions@risd.edu. But I will remind everyone that the topic of today's webinar is portfolio tips. And so with that, we will transition into our portfolio tips info session for today. Let's start by talking about what a portfolio is. The broad definition of a portfolio is a collection of examples that showcases your thinking and making in your creative practice. But keep in mind, the portfolio you put together for your RISD application has specifications and parameters. All art schools have different portfolio requirements and look for specific things. So in this presentation, I'm going to go into depth about what RISD looks for in a portfolio. I'll also note that this Portfolio Tips webinar is tailored towards the undergraduate application process, with a default to the first year application specifically. If you are a prospective transfer student, you will still receive plenty of helpful information in this session, but I would also recommend checking out our transfer-specific webinars throughout the rest of the winter and spring. Let's start with the basic requirements slash guidelines for the portfolio. Your RISD portfolio is meant to be a highly curated, limited selection of just your strongest examples of visual work. First year applicants will use SlideRoom, an online portfolio platform, to submit their portfolio to RISD. If you're wondering what is SlideRoom, don't worry, we go over how to use that specific platform in our application prep webinar series. Transfer applicants will upload their portfolio within their application submission. In SlideRoom, you need to include at least 12 pieces, and you will have up to 20 slots you can fill. You do not need to max out all 20 slots, and in fact, we encourage quality over quantity. Include only the pieces that you feel are the strongest, unique, and most interesting to you. Generally, when we're reviewing your application's portfolio, we're looking for creativity, personality, experimentation, risk-taking, unique ideas, curiosity, and thoughtful visual decisions. We'll talk a little bit more about all these things a little later on. When we review your portfolio, we also look to see if you'd be a good fit for how RISD teaches. Your RISD education for our first years will begin with the Experimental and Foundation Studies program, or EFS for short. EFS is a required foundation program for all RISD first year students, and it is a summer program for most transfer students. In sections of 20, students work within 3 studios: drawing, design, and spatial dynamics, which is our fancy word for three-dimensional creation. It's a good idea to keep the EFS classes in mind when you're putting together your portfolio. Throughout EFS studios, RISD's students pursue drawing, design, and spatial dynamics, both as powerful ways to investigate the world and as essential activities intrinsic to art and design practice. These studios become laboratories for varied and challenging activities to explore, experiment, and iterate. The philosophy behind our experimental and foundation studies program is the same philosophy that will carry through your entire education at RISD. Focused value in collaborative interplay across design, fine arts, and the liberal arts. Again, since all first-year students begin their education in the experimental and foundation studies program, you won't be applying directly to a major. This means that your work shouldn't be restricted to one interest or medium. It's a good idea to consider general values that we hold near, like experimentation, process, conceptual thought, creative problem solving, and technical skills. So, one question we hear all the time in admissions is what is more important, technical skill or creativity? Assignments or experimentation? The answer for us is, of course, both, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. When we're talking about technical skill, we're referring to how you purposefully use your materials to achieve a finished piece or endeavor. There are some key terms to consider when you think about technical skill in the context of your own work. One of the first that comes to mind is composition. How do you arrange all the different elements within a piece? Or texture, the literal feel of a tactile surface or material, including the appearance of a tactile surface or material. Nafis White made a series of sculptures made entirely out of hair and hair accessories, inspired by the Victorian era tradition of art crafted from hair of deceased loved ones. In these pieces, Nafis honors African American hairstyling techniques and celebrates the inventiveness, care, and love that is shared between people, especially Black women. Also, be sure to think about texture within your digital pieces. You can use drawing tools in different programs to add layers and intrigue to your digital pieces. Think about point of view, how you compose your piece in relation to the viewer. In other words, is the viewer looking at the subject from below, behind, 1 mile away? And also think about mark making. How are you using your tools and instruments to represent something on the page? Think about light, how you use areas of light and dark to create an illusion of space, a sense of mood, and add emphasis in your piece. You can consider the color and temperature of the lighting. Here, it's kind of cold, early morning light. It really makes the piece feel empty. And here, in contrast, is a warm late afternoon light. It feels a little bit more cozy. Color, of course, is also an essential element of our technical skill sets. How can you communicate an emotional resonance within a hue, saturation, tone, or contrast? In all of these examples, we're not just talking about a technical skill in an isolated context. We're talking about how the use of the artist's technical skill allows them to communicate their idea in a more compelling way. Now, consider what do you have to say? How do you want to say it? Incorporating conceptual rigor into your work helps reviewers understand and investigate how you might think in the studio and in the classroom. In the words of our recent video project, it starts with a question. What are we talking about when we talk about concept? Consider mood, the feeling or impression that a piece leaves on the viewer. How can you use the technical elements we just covered to make your audience feel something? Mood can be expressed through use of color or texture, and through function as well. Here, the artist Joy Liu conveys the warmth of a mother spoon and a baby spoon nestled within. Consider your idea. What do you want the viewer to start thinking about when they look at or interact with your work? This can be a particular point of view or a set of values. It can be large or small scale issues. Here, Uyghur compares the horrors of war with privileged consumerism. How about narrative, the story your piece tells? This can be an illustration of linear series of events, storyboards, or even a suggestion of a story. Especially with design-based work, your proposal or piece needs to be functional. What problem is your piece trying to solve, and does it? What is your goal? Here we see a gardening tool for arthritis patients. This is why we challenge you to use your technical skills to go further than just an exercise about technique. One way you can go further is by allowing your work to shapeshift. In isolation, one of these drawings may look to be a rather simple observational drawing of objects in a student's house. But compiled together, enlarged in size, and fractally cluttered in composition, Tara uses an iterative process to expand beyond a routine observational drawing into something more compelling and more engaging. Tara herself described that her mother's house is a messy house. The piles of random clutter found in almost every room are a manifestation of and a metaphor for the strained, complicated relationships and emotional intensities of the house. We're cluttered, frustrated, loving folk, my mother and I. It's complicated, but it's our house, end quote. You can see that and feel that in the patchwork of these frames adhered together. Another way to expand beyond the redundancy of, say, a regular still life is to make your own still life. This student made their own still life out of found and created objects. Using lighting and composition very intentionally, LaBelle was able to draw a much creepier story than what the iPhone picture on the right captured, or what a drawing of a bowl of fruit could ever communicate. There's both concept and technical skill present in this example. Why not use some more color? There really are no rules. I encourage you to take risks, try new things, and develop your technical skills in things like observational drawing and mark making in exciting and adventurous ways, not just classroom assignments. So, vary your process. Take a look at the work you already have and identify the comfort zone you enjoy staying in. Seek out opportunities to get outside of that comfort zone when you can. Are you primarily a graphic designer? Maybe try taking a ceramics class if your high school or local community college offers one. Do you spend most of your time working on digital illustrations? Try something tactile and physical, like this multimedia illustration by Alina Jolie. This does not mean that you have to bounce around to every material or try every discipline in the world. If you're not interested in architecture or oil painting, you don't have to try it. You can find ways to experiment and vary your own process within the same mode of work you like to do. Here you see three completely different examples of portraiture: drawing, textile, and photography. So even if you like working in one discipline, consider how you can experiment. Within photography, for example, there are an infinite number of ways to compose and create an interesting photograph. From lighting to shadows to layering and mixed media, consider how your work can expand beyond the bounds of its own medium. Even if you have an idea of what you want to major in, use the portfolio as an opportunity to be creative. RISD offers 18 undergraduate majors, and our first year students are guaranteed a spot in whatever major they declare at the end of their first year. An interesting stat is that more than half of our students end up declaring a different major than what they originally entered into RISD believing they would major in. Keep an open mind, you might surprise yourself. All right, so we've talked a lot about experimentation and variety thus far in the presentation. Let's talk a little bit more about the specific things that RISD application reviewers might be looking for in your portfolio. Again, RISD does not have assignments or strict requirements for your portfolio submission. However, we do recommend including a curated selection of your best, most recent work, and we also recommend including a few drawings from observation. Reviewers are going to look for work from observation, and this is because you do a lot of observational-based work in your first year and beyond at RISD. You can approach observational drawing in a number of different ways, and a reminder is that it does not need to be photorealistic. The most common method of working from observation would be sort of the traditional observational drawing, which you'll hear us talk about a lot. Drawing from direct observation means working from real life people, objects, and places in front of you, not working from two-dimensional references like photographs. We discourage drawing from photographs or digital references in general because it often leads to flattened or distorted drawings. Drawing is not just marks on a piece of paper. As a primary mode of inquiry, drawing is central to forming questions and creating knowledge across disciplines. It is both a powerful way to investigate the world and an essential activity intrinsic to art and design practice. Like we talked about earlier in the presentation, drawing from observation doesn't have to be a boring charcoal drawing of a bowl of fruit or a 5-minute figure drawing. Observational drawings can be colorful, textured, abstract, energetic, eerie, quiet, or loud. You can observe real life qualities and exaggerate them, like you're seeing here. You can work for hours or for minutes and still create a compelling observation. And you can draw what interests you. You're not limited by what you think an observational drawing can be. If you're looking for some inspiration for what to draw next, here are some ideas. Maybe try a self-portrait from a reflection in the mirror. Draw a relative or friend. They're often quite game for participating in your artistic process. You can draw the view outside of your window or the dirty clothes on the floor of your room. How about making a diorama, collecting small items with interesting textures and shapes and colors and arranging them? You can draw food in your cabinets or pantry, your pets, buildings in your neighborhood. The list can kind of go on and on. And that leads us into the next central theme of what a reviewer might be searching for in your portfolio, which is personality. What do you have to say? How do you say it? And why are you in particular saying it? If you like to create characters, make sure you give them a personality too. We don't necessarily want to see what you think a RISD student's portfolio should look like. We want your portfolio to be a reflection of who you authentically are, what you find interesting, and how you think. An intuitive way to showcase your personality in the portfolio might be to include some sketchbook images. Sometimes we'll even see folks including videos of them flipping through their sketchbook to showcase some of their shorter term, more informal work in a video that counts as one piece within the portfolio. Okay, it's also important to talk about what we're not looking for in the portfolio. So this is just a short list. Please do not include master copies like recreations of Van Gogh's Starry Night or Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. We've seen those pieces before and they don't tell us anything about you. They actually just tell us about Van Gogh and Da Vinci, which we're all artists in our office, so we already know a thing or two. Please do not include fan art. Remember that this is, in essence, an academic submission. Please do not include anime or any style of work that is clearly derivative of a defined or highly identifiable style. It is hard to create anime style drawings that do not look like someone else's. Please do not include cliche photography like flowers or buildings, a reflection in the water, that sort of thing. Please do not include performing arts videos like dance performances or music concerts. I will note that any performance art related to our majors in sound and art and computation will be considered. And please do not create an exclusively digital portfolio. Yes, you'll upload all your work digitally, but we still want to see mediums at play in your portfolio that speak to your ability to make with your hands. I will also note that it's very important to respect the work of other creatives. And that goes back to the last point about making sure your work is your own. It's okay, and it's, of course, a part of the artistic practice to be inspired by other artists and designers. But use your own voice and your own ideas in your work and push your responses to pre-existing projects in new directions. Again, exercises like master copies can be really helpful for developing your technical skill set, but that is not the type of submission we're looking for in the portfolio. If you do reference an existing work of art in your portfolio, just be sure to credit the original artists in your description. If you have formatting questions, I'm happy to answer those today in our conversational Q&A. But I will also point out that we just recently did a webinar called Application Prep 5, Curating and Presenting Your Portfolio, which was presented by our colleague Marin, that goes way more into depth about slide room and the application submission process, specifically with regards to the portfolio. So if you want to see step-by-step instructions on how to submit your portfolio, if you want to see do's and don'ts for formatting, this will really be the YouTube video, the best webinar for you. So again, that's Application Prep 5, Curating and Presenting Your Portfolio. It should be one of the more recent videos on the RISD YouTube channel. Last thing I want to note before we wrap up the slides for today is that our deadlines are coming up. So, as you likely know, these are all our decision deadlines for the entrance term of fall of 2026. So, the early decision deadline round has passed. Coming up is the regular decision deadline of January 20th. Transfer application deadline is March 17th. We only offer a fall entrance term for our transfer students. And on the off chance that we have a graduate prospective student joining us today, I'll note that your deadline is January 5th this year. But definitely check in on some of those other webinars that are tailored towards the graduate application process. So again, for all the first years in the room, January 20th is the date to have in the back of your head. All right, so that is the conclusion of the slide portion of today. Here on the screen is our email address, and I'll leave it up for a few seconds so folks can jot this down. LJ will also drop the email address in the chat towards the end of our conversation. So if you have any questions at all, you can always reach us here. We're truly here to help and guide you in the portfolio and application process. But with that, I will go ahead um, and share my screen. One second here. Why do I feel like a old lady right now, not being able to figure out how to unshare my screen? There we go. Okay. All right. You're muted, LJ.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, so we've got a handful of questions coming in. The first being for the 12 to 20 submissions, is that separate projects or works, or is it like different images of the same work? How are we categorizing those things?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the perimeter that I usually provide for students is that we need at least 12 pieces and you have at most 20 slides to fill. So there's some leeway there in terms of how you want to format your slides and what type of work you'd like to show. I would recommend that you have at least 12 separate projects that are unique in their identity and can stand on their own. You can provide, a full portfolio of 20 different projects, but sometimes what students will end up doing is maybe including 15 individual projects and adding an additional slide for one or two of those projects that showcases a little bit more of the process or the development of the project. Another common thing we'll see is someone will use one of their slides to submit a video of them flipping through a sketchbook. So there is flexibility in how you'd like to format and curate your portfolio. But just keep in mind, minimum 12 pieces, and you have up to 20 slides to fill.
Awesome, thank you. And the next one is, can you clarify like what research or preparatory work might look like?
Totally. So, of course, it's going to look different for different artists and designers. Generally speaking, we want to see mostly finished projects. So, the final version of a piece that's come to its full sort of end goal or to its full fruition, if that's a phrase. Research or preparatory work might look like initial sketches, in progress work. It might look like a photo a friend took of you, dipping your sculpture into a vat of paint, whatever the process has been like for you. And you're welcome to include more process or sort of in progress based documentation in your portfolio, but not for too many projects, maybe just two projects at most. And that is again because RISD has an emphasis on finished pieces in the portfolio.
And for observational work, is it okay for that to be in digital if I like to work digitally, or is there a strong preference for traditional mediums?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I'll say is that in essence, reviewers are looking at applicants' portfolio to get an idea for their preparation for the first year program. And the first year program at RISD has a heavy emphasis on drawing and observational drawing and using charcoal and graphite on paper. So, reviewers are going to look for that skill set. Having an array of digital work is not necessarily the most representative of your potential for success in the first year program. That being said, it's perfectly acceptable to include digital work, but I would highly recommend including some work that is not digital in nature, that is more traditional or physical, pencil or pen on paper. It helps us understand that you are indeed ready to take on that first year program.
Oh, right. If I majored in architecture, is it okay to include floor plans along with the piece itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one thing to note, a pretty important thing to note actually, is that for our first year applicants, you are not applying directly to a major. And so your portfolio does not have to be, and honestly shouldn't be major specific. Specifically for students interested in architecture, we're well aware that other schools you might be applying for will want a specifically architecturally focused portfolio. So for the RISD portfolio, I'd recommend editing down the architectural work that you want to showcase. I would not recommend including floor plans, but things like axons or isometric drawings, 3D renders, those are okay to include as long as they tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking as a designer and not just your technical, Rhino or AutoCAD skill sets. So I guess the answer is twofold. First of all, your portfolio should not be entirely major specific. And secondly, if you do have an interest in design fields like architecture, just make sure your work can speak to your fit for the overall RISD curriculum, not just the architecture curriculum.
And should I submit digitally drawn comics if they're not specifically in an anime style, but are still less realistic and maybe more cartoonish?
Hmm. You're certainly welcome to include those drawings. I would say if they are part of your development of a unique style of illustration, then we'd love to see that. Just make sure that work is coming from you. Make original characters. Play around with the way that you're letting the body language of these characters communicate. And yeah, I guess just be playful with your illustrations. They don't need to be, we're not looking for perfection here, we're looking for potential. So if those characters and those animations can help us understand you, that will be helpful.
And I think your answer to that question can also kind of answer this next one, which was like, can we submit pieces that were inspired by or are part of an art trend? Right. Like as long as it's still coming from you and you're adding your own unique voice and personality to that, you're more than welcome to.
Totally.
And is there a specific sketchbook format that we prefer? For example, a PDF with the best pages, or do we prefer like a flip through?
I'm so glad you asked. So, we are not too particular about formatting. Here are sort of the bullet points that I want everyone to know. The first thing is that with the RISD portfolio, we love for the slides to be as clean and clear and concise as possible. No more than 3 images on one slide. Maybe no more than 2 slides per project or grouping of materials. Videos should not be over 3 minutes in length, and we do not want to see multi-page PDFs. So those are sort of the general guidelines for formatting. If you want to include sketchbook images, I would say that our preferred format would just be like a 30-second video, literally of you holding your phone up and flipping through sketchbook pages. It does not need to be like fancy or well produced. As long as you have good lighting and a smartphone camera, you should be good to go. And just upload that as a video. But again, we do not want to see a multi-page PDF because it makes it really hard for us to see on the slide room end of things. And if you want to kind of see like what the portfolio might look like from our end, application prep 5, about maybe 2/3 of the way into the video, Marin shows examples of that.
Cool. And we had this question once before too, so I'll just say it out loud. Everything is due on January 20th. We don't have separate deadlines for the Common App versus portfolio. All materials must be due on January or, submitted by January 20th. You're welcome to submit the Common App first and then the portfolio, vice versa, just as long as they're both submitted to us by January 20th.
Yep. I'll also just briefly add on that note, sometimes folks get a little bit concerned that their recommenders haven't submitted their letters of recommendation by the deadline. That's not gonna harm your application if they get it in a day or two late. So make sure you submit your part of the application before the deadline, regardless of whether your recommenders have. And then just send them a quick email that says, hey, just reminding you about the deadline. But again, everything due by the deadline.
Okay, so somehow we have a lot of questions about the written word in the portfolio, in kind of two separate ways. One, what do we think about adding text onto slides with our final pieces of work? And two, can we submit things like artist statements or creative writing pieces in the portfolio?
Yes, these are all really great questions. So again, I will say that the RISD application process and the reviewers want to see your visual art and design speak for itself. So the emphasis should be on your visual work. The written word is a companion to your visual work, but it should not overcompensate for what your visual work might be lacking in. It shouldn't clutter the slide. It makes it really distracting for us to read, if that's the case. So, what I'd recommend is that you submit your images on their own. Any description, material usage, process, info, context that you think will be important can all be written in the caption section of Slide Room or the RISD application if you're a transfer applicant, and keep it concise. 3 sentences max, perhaps, like really letting the visual work do the majority of the work. And then if you are a creative writer, many RISD students are, that is great, but we do not want to see it in the portfolio because, again, this is a visual art and design portfolio. So creative writing that is isolated from visual art and design should not be included. Things like screenwriting, poetry, um, what else? Any sort of creative writing. Those don't really belong in the RISD portfolio, but you're welcome to take elements of your creative writing thus far and incorporate them into your Common App essay or the additional info section of your application. So know that there are other areas of the application other than the portfolio to demonstrate your interdisciplinary skill sets.
And this one is maybe kind of related, but also not. But I'm going to ask it because you are part of this process.
Yes.
If applying to the dual degree program, can the portfolio for both applications be identical? Kind of like the shared essay, Brown requirements are slightly different. So that's why the question is posed.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've actually been getting that one a lot lately, so I'm happy to clear it up. When you apply for the Brown RISD dual degree program, the first thing that you're doing is submitting an application to RISD and Brown as you would normally. So you should focus on submitting a great application for RISD, which means submitting a great portfolio, and you should focus on submitting a great application for Brown, which will include a number of things, including the option of submitting a visual arts portfolio. So keep in mind that the portfolio is required for RISD and optional for Brown, and that will not impact your standing as a dual degree applicant. I would recommend spending most of your time on the RISD portfolio if you want to be considered for the dual degree program, because our admissions process really factors that in heavily to how we review those applicants. For the Brown Visual Arts portfolio, that's going to be more of a supplementary element to your application, and it'll help reviewers get a better insight into your ability to navigate the open curriculum at Brown. But again, they're not an art design school, so they review that slightly differently. But in short, it does not need to be the exact same portfolio. You can tailor it however you want for each school. It can be the same portfolio if you want to make it such. And then the other thing I'll add is if you are admitted to Brown and RISD, and then considered for the dual degree program, we will use the RISD portfolio as the default portfolio for consideration for the dual degree program itself. So I know that's a lot of information and kind of gets into the specifics of the dual degree application process. I will note that we do specific webinars about Brown RISD dual degree that you can find. I'm on them. You'll see my face again. And those will feature current students, current dual degree students who can talk more about what the application process was like for them.
Some of the work maybe that our people are submitting might be a part of juried exhibitions. Could that be noted or should it be noted in the description? And does that like add or subtract to how we're reviewing the work itself?
Sure. Well, we're always happy to see that you've put yourself out there in terms of sharing your work with the communities you're a part of. And sometimes that looks like being a part of different exhibitions, competitions, prizes, collaborative projects, all of these things. So you're welcome to include that information in the description for a piece. But I would also recommend including that information within the common application. You'll see a section sort of near the extracurriculars portion that has you explain a little bit more about different awards or honors you've received during your high school education. So I would also recommend including it there. But as far as whether it adds or subtracts from an application, I will say it neither makes nor breaks an application. It's helpful for us to see that you're exploring art within your community, but students have access to different resources and different opportunities. And so it never harms an applicant that they haven't had the opportunity to participate in something like a juried exhibition during their time in high school.
And we have two questions about the transfer portfolio. And I just want to say that we have webinars, again, I think you mentioned this at the top of the presentation, that are specific for the transfer process. And I certainly want to kind of defer questions to that since, we're mostly here talking about the undergrad first year application process. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the transfer process, please don't hesitate to check those webinars out. We might have some recordings of those on our RISD YouTube page or hosting those as the year goes on too. And quickly before I get to the next question, I just want to make sure everyone's putting their questions again into the Q&A chat box. I see some coming into the chat, but it's hard for me to sort of keep track of those. So Q&A chat box is best to put those questions in. And here's our famed question here that we often receive. When my sister applied, she said she had to draw a bicycle. Is that required anymore?
Yeah, she did have to draw a bicycle, and no, it is not required anymore. So we used to have a RISD assignment as a part of the application process. We no longer do. So you can include whatever work you think speaks best to your potential as a RISD student. And if you happen to have a drawing of a bicycle, that's great, but it's not a requirement anymore.
And this is like not related necessarily to the presentation, but I think it can be helpful when talking about the portfolio to maybe understand a little bit about how we're reviewing everything. The
Mhm.
question in particular is how important are grades, extracurriculars, and SAT scores for the undergrad app. But I think that can kind of help inform the portfolio a little bit too, which is maybe why I'll ask it sort of live.
Yeah, totally. I think it is a great question because we're not just a portfolio, we're human beings who have done all these things um, and we're using all elements of the application. So yes, we review applications holistically, which means that we take into account everything that you include in your application to better understand you as an individual and your potential to thrive at RISD. So the way that I sort of think about the application as a reviewer and as a counselor to students is that it's sort of like a solar system. You have you, the sun, in the center of the solar system, and orbiting around you are all of these elements that help us better understand the system itself. So maybe in this metaphor, the portfolio is a little bit closer to the sun because it does play a large role in how we understand your potential for success. Grades, letters of recommendation, extracurriculars are all really helpful supporting elements because they help round out how we think about your navigation of the academic system and your participation within your community itself. And then there's other supporting elements that maybe are a little bit more like Pluto. You know, sometimes they're sometimes they're considered a planet, sometimes they're not. So those elements might be juried exhibitions or your SAT or ACT scores if you choose to include them because those are optional. These are all pieces that can help us understand you, but are not necessarily required for your competitive spot in the application process. So everything is important to some degree, but portfolio and academics tend to be sort of the central components of that orbit, if that makes sense.
That's a great analogy. Can I submit an animation to the portfolio and maybe this can relate to video too? And if so, is there a limit on how long it can be?
Yeah, submit an animation. We'd love to see it. We just ask that any time-based media, like videos or animations, stay under 3 minutes in length. That's the maximum amount of time that we can guarantee a reviewer will watch. in its entirety. If you submit something that's 15 minutes long, I cannot guarantee that a reviewer will be able to watch that full 15 minutes. So yes, submit your animation, just keep it short.
And we have a couple of questions that are similar to this one. Do all of the art pieces that I'm submitting in my portfolio need to be related under one theme?
No. You do not need to have an overarching theme. This can get a little bit confusing for students who participate in AP studio art because with AP courses, there usually is an overarching theme. So you can totally use projects from AP curriculum in your portfolio, but we want to see what you're up to across mediums, across ideas. And I actually encourage you to include some projects that are like way outside your comfort zone or way outside the typical realms of conceptual thought that you investigate. Because it helps us understand you. Keep in mind that, again, this portfolio is a representation of your potential, not your perfection. We do not expect any one of you to be like fully fleshed artists who like know exactly what they want to make. Like this is the time to try things. So take that as an asset for your portfolio.
Incredible. And I'm gonna like maybe extend this question a little bit. The question is, do we need to title the art pieces? But I'm gonna extend that to the rest of the sort of things on slide room. So things like title, medium size description, which we kind of talked about already, but how important are those aspects?
Yeah. So this is honestly a favorite question of mine, even though it can kind of seem pretty
Me
rudimentary.
too. I don't
I,
know
yeah,
why.
I think it's because when I was an art student, I had a million conversations with my peers and my professors about the what a title can do for a project. So here's what I'll say. No, it is not required for a piece to have a title. But a title is an opportunity to add another dimension to your piece. So I would recommend taking advantage of the title to explore how you might use text to collaborate with your visual art and design. So play around with that, see how it lands with you, talk to teachers about how you might title your artwork. And then, as far as the other elements of the application, or sorry, the portfolio submission goes, again, use all of them to your advantage and to help us understand the project a little bit better. Size helps us understand scale when we're staring at a computer screen. Material helps us understand things like texture and color because things appear differently on a computer screen. So it helps us kind of imagine them in the real world. And then the description is a great opportunity to tell us more about context, process, and and sort of what the process of making that project was like for you. Keep in mind, anyone who reviews your portfolio is an artist or designer themselves. So we are looking for those elements to help support our understanding of the visual artwork you submit. That's my long answer to a very short question. But I love talking about titles. And if you have more questions about like how do you even title a piece, you can always reach out to us.
Okay, let's see. This is an interesting question because now we have a sound major, so that's why I'm gonna again ask it aloud. I want to showcase my music that I've made via SoundCloud or Vimeo. Can I put links in my portfolio that take the reviewer to these sites? What do you think about music submissions in the port?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I have a two-part answer to this. The first is more logistical. I wouldn't recommend including links that take us out of the portfolio. So I would not recommend relying on a SoundCloud link or a Vimeo link in the portfolio. Instead, download those files as MP4s or MP3s and submit them manually to SlideRoom, and that'll really be helpful for us. Another idea, perhaps, is because RISD is sort of expanding how we think about visual art and design, you might want to include a visual element to your sound or music-based work. So maybe you compose an interesting photograph that reflects some of the sonic elements of the piece and you attach the sound file to the photograph. So that way there's a visual component to the sound being communicated as well. Maybe you create an installation that allows the audience member to sort of experience the sound in a more holistic way. There's different elements to sort of play around and be creative with how you showcase your music and sound-based work. The second thing I will say is that there is a distinction between what we think of as sound at RISD and what others might think of as music and music-based production in performing arts. So the sound major at RISD is highly experimental. It's pretty funky. It deals with things like installation and the histories of synthetic sound. Look into the sound major at RISD and make sure it aligns with how you're thinking about your own work. If you want to follow a more traditional pathway of music and music-based production and songwriting, that might be a great fit for a different school that has more of a traditional approach to sound and music. So that's like what I would say. I don't know. Do you have anything to add, LJ?
No, I think that was a good answer.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and this next question is how is anime style defined? Does it encompass all the different styles in the last century? And what is, I'm sorry, and is that considered different from Western style cartoons? And is that allowed in the portfolio? So what are the kind of distinctions that we're making here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question because there's not, sort of a black and white answer to what is and is not anime or sort of an acceptable style of work in the academic portfolio. So the general guideline, use your discretion. Is the piece uniquely your own? Does it reflect ideas and approaches to visual illustration and creation that are unique to you? If yes, include it. If no, don't include it. There can be ways to play on to different styles that are pre-existing. So much of contemporary and modern, postmodern, and contemporary work is reactions to pre-existing artwork. That's like definitely part of the language of art making in our current era. But again, I would say that your portfolio is meant to be a reflection of you, not just what you like. So I could fill a portfolio with all of the influences that I've had that I've had on my own work, but that wouldn't tell you as much about me and how I see the world as my actual work itself. So just think about those delineations, talk to your teachers, ask them if something is sort of sourced from an academic place, and use your best discretion. I mean, again, there's no like direct line between what is and isn't okay, but if it's derivative, if it's highly derivative from a pre-existing style that I could pull up on YouTube right now, that's not the best example of your own work. That's how I would say it. I don't know. LJ, you have anything to add? That's a tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think we maybe use anime like as an example because it is so prevalent. But
Hmm.
we're certainly not trying to like single out anime and be like just simply no anime. It's right. It's really any um kind of stylistic choice that is quite popular and widespread. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it could be the same thing as like creating your own painting in the style of Van Gogh, right? That's not really telling you too much about how you're seeing the world. So, well, I think certainly like the language that we use can maybe like single out some of those elements. I think really what we're trying to exemplify is that we want you to be creating choices that are uniquely your own, and again, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself rather than using someone else's visual language, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And like to kind of add on to that as well, it's great to be interested in these things. We are
Yeah,
not
right.
we are not saying don't be interested in these things. You can totally be interested and make work along those lines. They just might not be the best fit for the RISD portfolio.
Yes, incredible. Okay, sorry, I was just trying to like type and then also pay attention.
You're good. The work of a
Um,
chat manager is complex.
yeah. And especially when you have ADHD, it's wild. This is not necessarily our jurisdiction, but again, I'm going to say it because I think it can be made a little general. I'm thinking about attending the RISD pre-college summer program in Providence, so I'm assuming the in-person one. Does this program give high school students a full idea of what it's like in EFS for the first year at RISD? And do you think some of the work created in the program could be a portfolio piece for admission?
Yeah, very thoughtful question. Excited that you're thinking about pre-college. I've really only ever heard amazing things about the program, although we do not oversee it as an admissions office. That is under the jurisdiction, like LJ said, of the continuing education department. So what I would say from my observations of the program is that it does give students a great sense of what the first year program, the EFS program, is like. Because you'll be taking classes across drawing, design, and spatial dynamics, and classes within your pre-college major. I believe there's 20 pre-college majors right now, so there's a lot to choose from. And of course, the work that you create at pre-college should be included in your portfolio. Only the work that lands with you. You're going to make a lot of work that you don't love, and you're going to make a lot of work that you're really excited about, and that's just what it means to be an artist, quite frankly. Um, so definitely, the work you make at pre-college can be included in your portfolio, and you'll also have access to a lot of really great resources in pre-college, like a portfolio review with admissions. You'll have access to teachers who can give you insight on your work itself. So it's not a requirement for admission to RISD by any means, but it can certainly be helpful.
Yeah, and I also just put into the chat too the email for continuing education office. They oversee the pre-college program. So if you have any questions that might come up about that, don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're always happy to chat about it. Their email is just ce@risd.edu. Again, I just put it into the chat too. And I've got two more questions in here, and they're a little bit similar. So what do we think about realism, right? Like, are we preferring style? I mean, I have to say this when I'm asking the question. I personally am not a fan of like those kind of distinctions, stylized versus realistic, right? We're always like looking at things differently. But anyways, RISD, do we prefer maybe more stylistic choices in illustration or painting or works that are primarily based in realism? And what about those items that are realistic? What can that sort of exemplify who I am is maybe how I'll wrap that up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. What I will say is that RISD is a collection of thousands of, of artists and designers who have different approaches and different ideas about what constitutes, like you're saying, LJ, different types of styles and different types of approaches to art creation. So there is not a black and white answer to your question. What I will say is maybe connected to a larger theme of like art historical concepts and like what it means to be a contemporary artist. But we all have access to a camera in this day and age. So creating work that is completely photorealistic does not hold the same weight right now that it used to 100 years ago. Think about what you are trying to say in your work. Are you better off saying that as a direct rendering and representation of the world around you? Are you better off altering elements of your observation to influence the audience and the viewer in how they think? I think that these are all important questions to ask yourself as you're developing as an artist. Certainly, having a foundational skill set and being able to render the world around you as it is in front of you can be helpful. But I would say that a lot of our most successful or successful is a crazy word. A lot of our most sort of like interesting work that comes out of RISD is work that plays with the idea of sort of like what is reality and what is realism and how do we investigate the world around us in those ways. So that's like a very art school response to that question. I would just say there's no correct answer, and I would encourage you to experiment rather than try to replicate styles that already exist because they already exist. And maybe you have something to say and something to make that does not already exist.
Incredible answer.
Thanks, LJ. It's a tough one, but it
It
gets into all
is.
my favorite topics. So
Right. And this is like a maybe was asked in a more specific way, right? Specific to the person asking, but I'm going to generalize it a little bit. Because again, I think it's important context for the portfolio. The question is, I don't have formal art classes during my schooling, during high school, but have pursued, art training elsewhere. What does this um, how does this context kind of give to the portfolio or how are we reviewing portfolios given students have a wide variety of different artistic backgrounds?
totally. Yeah, we are well aware that there is a huge range in resources and arts education programs across the country, across regions, across states. I went to a high school that had very little arts funding. I was only allowed to take one semester of visual arts in my entire time as a high school student. And so that is not a unique experience to me, unfortunately, across this country, and we understand that. And so taking advantage of other opportunities within your school, extracurricularly, that help you develop your artistic practice is totally going to be encouraged and exciting for us to see in the application. So if you've taken advantage of different programs nearby you or across the country or whatever it might be during summers, during breaks, that can be really cool for us to see because it gives us sort of an insight to your demonstrated interest in the field and in pursuing artistic studies further. Um, but we're also well aware that resources and access to these resources are varied. And if you are not able to take advantage of pre-college programs or extracurricular opportunities due to a number of different reasons, like, having a part-time job or providing childcare for your family or having to commute 2 hours to school, those are also really understandable elements of your life in this moment and will be taken into account as well. So again, we really try to get a holistic understanding of your where you're at in terms of your educational and artistic development. And there's not going to be there's not going to be a formula for how you have to do it to get to RISD and to be a successful RISD student. So just take advantage of the resources you have available to you. That's like the main thing that I would say. And know that if and when you get to RISD, you're going to be in a class of 20 other first year students who all have a different pathway that got them there. And that's actually what makes the education so special. So that's sort of what I would say. Maybe we're getting really philosophical here. So
Some
I
really
hope that's
lovely
helpful.
answers coming out of Emily Drennan.
Yeah,
That's great.
I'm feeling philosophical. Yeah. Um, okay.
I think that's all the questions we have. Someone did ask if we're sending out a recording of this. We are recording it. We'll post it on our RISD YouTube channel. I put a link to that earlier in the chat. I would try to find it again, but I know if I open the RISD YouTube, it'll start playing a video and it'll have some sound on here that might be a little bit jarring. So I won't do that. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll be posting it later on.
Perfect. Yeah, it'll get posted soon. You'll see our faces again. All right, so I think that concludes our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us today, for being here and investing in preparation for your college application process. We're always around to help. LJ just dropped the admissions email address in the chat. You can email us with questions anytime. I will note that our office will be closed for winter break. Next week. So keep that in mind. If you have any urgent questions, get those in tomorrow before our office closes up. But we hope you have a great holiday season, a restful break, and lovely time spent with family. All right, have a good one, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.